When a new Grand Prix driver makes an instant first impression, is considered to be a hot prospect, and gets snapped up by a front-running team, it can go very well indeed. Think about the trajectory taken by Michael Schumacher, for example. But it can also go very badly indeed. And the perfect way of demonstrating that is to look at the career of Jean Alesi, a crowd favourite, Tifosi hero, and one-time Grand Prix winner. Alesi was a relatively late starter in motorsport, first entering karting at the age of 16, before racing in the Renault 5 Turbo Championship in 1983. In 1987, he won the French Formula 3 title and earned a seat for 1988 with the French Oreca team in Formula 3000. He moved to Eddie Jordan's Formula 3000 team in 1989, where he beat Eric Comas to the title on a countback after the two finished the season level on points. By the time he won that title, he was already making waves in Formula 1, having made his debut for the Tyrrell team in France, taking 4th place after a mighty drive in an unfancied car. He had briefly run in 2nd place during the race, and Ken Tyrrell was sufficiently impressed to offer him a contract until the end of 1990 on the basis of that sparkling debut. He drove in 7 more races in 1989 when Formula 3000 commitments allowed, and he backed up his scintillating debut with 5th place at Monza and another 4th place in Spain. His first full season of Formula 1 would start with something of a bang. The United States Grand Prix at Phoenix was to provide a shock result in qualifying. Pirelli had introduced a new soft qualifying tyre, and cars using the Italian rubber, generally ones usually found in the midfield or even further back, were at the sharp end of the grid. Pierluigi Martini qualified his Minardi 2nd. Andrea De Cesaris claimed 3rd in a Dallara. Alesi's Tyrrell was 4th, and Olivier Grouillard qualified his Osella 8th. It was a truly remarkable shake-up. Between Alesi and Grouillard sat 3 world champions: Senna, Prost and Piquet. For Ken Tyrrell it was an even greater bonus. He had only switched his team from Goodyear tyres to Pirelli in the week of the race, having been a loyal Goodyear customer for 18 years. From 4th on the grid, Alesi was able to snatch the lead, as Berger covered off Martini into the first corner, leaving the door open for the Tyrrell to pass them both. By the time Senna had got past De Cesaris for 3rd place, Alesi had started to build a big lead over Berger. When Berger spun his McLaren into the wall on lap 9, Senna was more than 8 seconds adrift of the race leader. It was a gap he closed over the next 25 laps, and on lap 34 Senna dived past on the inside of turn 1, taking the lead. But Alesi held the outside line, which then became the inside line for turn 2, and surprised Senna by diving past to retake the lead. It was an audacious move, and very much not the sort of thing we were used to people doing to Ayrton Senna. Next time around, Senna retook the lead and made sure the door was firmly shut into turn 2. But Alesi tracked him all the way to the finish, reaching the checkered flag just 8 seconds shy of the McLaren and 46 ahead of Thierry Boutsen's Williams. 2nd place, and the way he had fought Senna, had certainly raised his profile across the sport. 3 races later, at Monaco, Alesi put in an even more impressive performance, qualifying in 3rd place behind only Senna and Prost, and finishing the race in 2nd place, just 1 second behind a slowing Senna. It would be the closest he would come to a victory for many years. This blistering start to the season started a scramble for his signature on a contract, with Williams and Ferrari battling Ken Tyrrell, who was desperate to hold on to his new star driver. Alesi eventually signed with Williams and went on to dominate Formula 1 for much of the 90s, winning several titles and becoming one of the most successful drivers the sport has ever known. No, sorry, only kidding. Although he did actually sign a contract with Williams, the British team were courting Ayrton Senna and wouldn't countersign the contract until they had time to try and land the Brazilian, with Alesi as their backup option. Alesi met with Cesare Fiorio at Ferrari and was offered a contract. He informed Williams that he had received an offer from Ferrari, but Frank Williams was not prepared to commit until he had exhausted his chase for Senna. Alesi was left with little option. If he waited on Williams, he could end up losing both drives. He signed a contract with Ferrari, and the Italian team paid Williams substantial compensation to terminate the initial contract. Williams would fail to land Senna, and instead signed Mansell, who would take the title in 1992, the start of a run of 4 championships in 6 years for the British team. At the time, with Prost battling Senna for the title, a move to Ferrari looked heaven-sent for the French boy with Sicilian roots. But it was that move which was the difference between Alesi becoming an all-time great and being a driver that enthusiasts love and many modern Formula One fans have never even heard of. The 1991 Ferrari was terrible in all sorts of ways. Prost called it a truck and was sacked by the team as a result. Alesi scored 3 podiums, his first for Ferrari coming up Monaco, following up with 2 more in Germany and Portugal, as a result finishing in 7th place in the World Championship. Reliability was the biggest problem, and a glut of engine, gearbox and clutch issues cost him many more points. 1992 turned out to be just as bad, with more reliability issues, and the dominant performance of the Williams Renaults, relegating Alesi to battles for minor places with Benetton and McLaren drivers. 3rd places in Spain and Canada were the only reward for a difficult season. The car only made it to the finish line 6 times all season, but Alesi managed to accumulate enough points to finish in 6th place in the championship, a poor return when Mansell was taking the World Championship in the seat Alesi had given up 2 years before. In response to Williams' dominance, Ferrari launched its own actively suspended car in 1993. If the 1992 car had been generally unreliable, the new car was just as bad and added suspension problems to the list of reasons for retiring from races. Alesi managed to claim 3rd place in Monaco and then a season's best result of 2nd place at Monza to the delight of the Tifosi. Based on his experience with Ferrari to date, many were surprised when Alesi signed a new 2-year contract with the team. More so that Gerhard Berger appeared to have assumed the team leader role for 1994. As we know, 1994 was a season of general turmoil. At Ferrari, Berger generally outscored Alesi, with the latter also missing 2 races early in the season after suffering a back injury in testing after the first race. For the balance of the year, Alesi generally scored well when he reached the finish line. The most painful retirement came at Monza, where Alesi had taken a superb pole position, the first for Ferrari at home since Mario Andretti had claimed pole in 1982. After a restart resulting from a first corner accident caused by Eddie Irvine, Alesi led the early part of the race, pulling away from his pursuers and seemingly on course to break his duck in some style, at the Temple of Speed, driving a Ferrari and in front of hundreds of thousands of adoring fans. Sadly, when he pitted for fuel and tyres on lap 15, he was unable to get the car moving again, a result of a gearbox failure. Alesi scored 4 podiums across the season, including 2nd place at Silverstone after Michael Schumacher's disqualification. It was good enough to claim 5th place in the championship. However, Berger suffered fewer reliability problems and scored 6 podiums, including a victory in Germany, and claimed 3rd place in the championship. In 1995, Renault engines dominated the championship, with Benetton and Williams drivers winning all but 1 race, in Canada. It was here that Alesi was finally to break his duck and claim his only victory in Formula One. Not only was it the only time the Renault engine was defeated in 1995, it was also the last ever victory in Formula One for a 12-cylinder engine. It was Alesi's 31st birthday, and he won the race in a car bearing the number 27, most commonly associated with Canadian Grand Prix legend Gilles Villeneuve. The victory had some fortune about it, coming after Michael Schumacher had to pit with gearbox problems 11 laps from the flag. But Alesi had been running in a strong 2nd place at the time and was overdue a change of luck, having so often been the person on the wrong end of mechanical failure. The Ferrari ran out of fuel halfway around the slowing down lap, and Alesi completed his journey back to the pits atop the roll hoop of Schumacher's Benetton. The Canadian crowd had burst onto the track as Alesi completed the race. He was the most popular racer of his era, and delight at his victory was obvious amongst fans, colleagues, and the whole paddock. The best race of his career was also to come in 1995, at Suzuka in the rain, although it was once more to go unrewarded. Having qualified second alongside Michael Schumacher, Alesi was penalised for a jump start when his car started to creep forward on the grid. Despite no benefit being gained, Alesi was given a 10-second stop-and-go penalty. On lap 3, Alesi served his penalty, and what followed next was the best of Jean Alesi distilled into 25 magnificent laps. In the wet, Alesi began to carve through the field, passing cars everywhere around the spoon curve, 180R, around the outside of the chicane. Then he gambled by stopping for slick tyres on lap 7. After a cycle lap to judge the conditions on slicks, Alesi began to fly. Despite being forced into a spin by Pedro Lami's Minardi when battling for 15th place, Alesi's pace was enough to carry him into contention. Lapping 5 seconds a lap faster than the rest of the field, a combination of speed and other drivers following his lead and pitting for slick tyres, Alesi was soon up to second place again, behind only Schumacher's Benetton. With both drivers on slick tyres on a damp track, an incredible battle began. Alesi was initially lapping 3 seconds a lap faster, and although Schumacher found more speed, by lap 25 Alesi was 6 seconds behind the Benetton and still lapping a second a lap quicker. Sadly, it was at this point that his Ferrari suffered a driveshaft failure, ending the battle. Across the season, as well as victory, Alesi claimed 4 second places, including at the Nürburgring, when he was leading with just 2 laps to go, when fuel issues slowed him, allowing Schumacher to catch and pass him for the win. Improved results meant he was able to finish 5th in the championship once more, 1 place ahead of teammate Berger. After enduring 5 seasons of hell with Ferrari, Alesi's payback was to be dropped in favour of Schumacher, with the Frenchman moving across to Benetton in a straight swap of seats. He would be joined by Berger, who had turned down the offer of being Schumacher's number 2 at Ferrari. Expectations were high. Benetton had claimed the last 2 World Championships, whilst Ferrari had found its level as perennial underachiever, having just 2 race wins to show for the past 5 seasons. However, 1996 was to prove a disappointment. The new Benetton was quick, but outclassed by Williams, which won the first 5 races. Alesi initially looked like the Williams' closest challenger, but it soon became apparent that Michael Schumacher was able to drag a frankly awful Ferrari into positions it should never have reached, and quickly overhauled Alesi in the championship. In Spain, in atrocious conditions, Schumacher claimed perhaps his best ever victory, in a car which was far from competitive. It was the race which earned him the Rainmeister nickname. All of which meant that an excellent drive by Alesi to beat Jacques Villeneuve's Williams to second place was all but overlooked. Across the season, Alesi scored 8 podiums and clinched 4th place in the championship, his best ever result, but the season was still deflating. Schumacher had driven the Ferrari into 3rd place in the title race, and in one season equalled Ferrari's haul of victories from the previous half-decade. Flavio Briatore, not an arm-around-the-shoulder type of manager at the best of times, had read Alesi and Berger the riot act halfway through the season, as he felt the pair were guilty of too many driving errors. Benetton's failure to win a race, for the first time since Briatore had joined the team, was not something which went down well with him at all. Before the start of 1997, the Italian warned Alesi that unless results improved, he would not be given a new contract for 1998. The season opener was not a great race, therefore, for Alesi to decide to ignore team instructions and not take his pit stop, eventually running out of fuel after failing to pit for 5 laps after his planned stop. Briatore and Benetton were furious. Alesi's radio wasn't working, and he didn't know that he was due a pit stop. However, the team had been furiously waving pit boards at him for several laps, which wasn't having an impact, suggesting the radio wasn't the only thing not working that day. Alesi claimed he hadn't been looking at the pit boards because he was focused on the run down to the first corner, and only realised he might be due a pit stop when other cars stopped around him. Benetton were less than impressed with his explanation, especially as a podium finish had gone begging as a result. Given Briatore's temper, Alesi was lucky not to be turfed out on his ear straight away. especially as a number of less than stellar races followed the Australian debacle. In Spain, things came good though, and Alesi scored the first of 5 podium finishes he would achieve during the season. He finished 4th in the championship, but was overshadowed by Berger, who returned from an enforced 3-race absence resulting from illness and then the death of his father, to claim Benetton's first and only post-Schumacher victory. At the end of the season, Berger retired, and Briatore made good on his threat to dump Alesi. Alesi was forced to take a backward step and join Sauber. However, some strong performances restored some of the reputation that 2 difficult years at Benetton had tarnished. Alesi and Johnny Herbert formed the most experienced partnership on the grid, and Alesi comfortably had the measure of the Englishman. He scored his best result at the Belgian Grand Prix in a rain-soaked race, which featured a huge first-lap pile-up and runaway race leader Michael Schumacher being eliminated in a dangerous collision with David Coulthard whilst lapping the Scotsman. As Damon Hill brought Jordan its first Grand Prix victory, Alesi was climbing to the podium for the last time in his career. In 1999, the Sauber was much less reliable, but Alesi once more impressed with some drives which were more than the car deserved to achieve. His performances put him in the frame for a return to Ferrari, a move which was strongly supported by Michael Schumacher, but Alesi was eventually overlooked in favour of Rubens Barrichello. Alesi instead joined the team of former Ferrari teammate Alain Prost for 2000. Prost had taken over and renamed the Ligier team, and they were using Peugeot engines, which were far from the last word in reliability. It wasn't a particularly effective combination either. For the first time in his career, Alesi failed to score any points at all. In 2001, the team somewhat got its act together, reliability improved, and Alesi had brought the car home in the points in 3 races by the middle of the season. Events elsewhere were to end the Prost adventure for Alesi though. Over at Jordan, a difference of opinion between Eddie Jordan and Heinz-Harald Frentzen saw the German fired, and Alesi offered a seat with his former Formula 3000 boss's team. Prost hired Frentzen and sued Alesi for breach of contract. The switch of teams did little to improve Alesi's fortunes. He was generally outpaced by new teammate Jarno Trulli, and worse, on occasion by Frentzen in his old car too. At the end of the season, with no offer for 2002 in prospect, Alesi ended his career in an enormous accident with Kimi Räikkönen in Japan, from which both were lucky to walk away. His career lasted 202 races, 1 victory, and brought a handful of podiums. Meanwhile, in another universe, the Jean Alesi who held his nerve and stuck to his Williams contract for 1991 was a multiple race winner who carried all before him in 1993 and fought an epic battle with Ayrton Senna for the 1994 and 1995 World Championships, before finishing his career by achieving his dream of driving for Ferrari in his final seasons in Formula 1. On such small decisions do careers founder. Formula 1 history will barely remember Jean Alesi, but for just over a decade he lit up Formula 1 and was the most popular driver of his generation. For those who saw some of his finest races, it's an experience we won't forget.